Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I don't know the time that you will be accessing this video lecture. I trust that you are doing well and your academics is going on perfectly. Last week and then last 2 weeks, we studied learning. We studied the common theories, classical conditioning, operant conditioning. We talked about play-based learning, the types of play, the types of play-based learning, and how the teacher is supposed to arrange the classroom environment to facilitate play-based learning, etc. For this lecture, we'll be dealing with the factors affecting learning, and specifically, we'll be looking at memory. One of the things that facilitates learning is our ability to keep memory of the things that we have studied or to remember the things that we have studied. So we'll take a look at memory. What goes into memory? What are the branches of memory or the categories of memory, etc. We'll talk about how do we forget, what theories underlie forgetting, etc. And so relax as we go through the slides together. Okay, so basically the human memory is about keeping information. How do we keep information in our mind? That is memory. Simply put, there's no huge definition for memory for you to say memory is this and that. It simply has to do with your ability to remember or to keep information that you have already stored or kept in your memory. That is what we mean by memory. So, memory is part of our cognitive functions. It's part of the brain, and it is responsible for encoding, for storage, and then for retrieval. Mind you, when we say memory, it doesn't mean that it is part of your brain or there's a particular part of your brain that refers to memory. Okay, but it is a brain function. It is a cognitive function. So when you take a brain or a human brain, there's no part that's labeled as memory. No, but all the compartments of the brain, the different parts of the brain, contribute to some form of memory. So that is why I said that memory is a brain function. Okay. So memory is responsible for, our brain is responsible for encoding, for storing information, and also for retrieval of information. Okay. So we can say memory is the retention of information over time, and that influences our future actions, or that we retrieve to influence our future actions. Now, what are the processes of memory? Before you have something in your memory, something that you have in your memory or an information that you have kept in your memory, how did that information manage to get in your memory? How have you been able to store that information for that period of time? And whenever you are willing or whenever you are ready, you are able to access the information. So the first process of memory is what we call encoding, when you encode information. When we say encoding, we mean that you are allowing your information into what? The memory system, okay, by an automatic or by a personalized effort. So, as I am speaking to you through this video lecture, you are encoding what I am saying. So, specifically, you are using what? Your sense of hearing, your auditory senses to pick the information. So when you allow information into your memory system, then we are saying that you are encoding. So it is the process of putting new or incoming information into the memory system and preparing it for storage in the long-term memory. Encoding is usually accomplished by making new information meaningful and integrating it with the known in the long-term memory. So already you have some information or you know something about memory, and as I am talking to you through this video lecture, you are picking certain things and integrating it with what? what you already know. And simply put, that is what we call encoding. You are picking the information that I am giving out. The second process is what we call storage. That is when you process the information. Now you have picked the information up from your, let's say, your senses. Okay, so you are hearing me. So you are using your ear. Now you are going to process that information so that you retain it or you keep it for future use. That is what we mean by the storage. And then the third process is what we call the retrieval, where you are able to get back or you are able to access the information that you have stored in your memory. That is what we call retrieval. You bring it forth or you bring it to bear so that you can use it. Is that okay? So whatever I'm teaching you, for example, in the case of examination, you might be required to bring out this information so that you will use it to answer the questions that will be put there for you. And in that case, we say that you are retrieving or you are recollecting the information that you have stored. Okay. Now, there are some categories of memory. Remember what we just said is the processes. So first you encode the information, you store it, and then you retrieve it for future use. Now there are some aspects or branches or categories of memory. Okay, so first, the information goes into your sensory memory or your sensory register. Then it goes into your short-term memory, and then it goes into your long-term memory. So in essence, we have three categories of memory. The first is the sensory register or the sensory memory. The second is the short-term memory, and then the third is the long-term memory. Now, these three categories or these three aspects or layers were proposed by Atkinson and Schifrin in 1968, and they came up with a multi-step model of memory. So it's like a theory that or a model that explains how we encode information, how we store it, and how we retrieve it, and the different categories or the different aspects that we store information into. So for this lecture, we'll take each of these categories and we'll look at what goes on in there. So the sensory register, what happens there? The short-term memory, what goes on there? Then the long-term memory. So basically, this is it. So you have a stimulus. For example, somebody is talking to you. It's an example of a stimulus. So your sensory organs will pick the information. And here, as I am speaking to you, your ears, and you are even seeing me. So you are using your eyes as well. So you are using these two sensory organs to pick the information that I am giving. The information goes to your sensory memory, it moves to your short-term memory, then it moves finally to your long-term memory. And that is the categories of memory that we have. So let's take the first one, the sensory register or the sensory memory. So this is where information comes in first. So we can say that this is where encoding takes place. This is where you pick the information. Okay. So whatever I am saying now, you are picking it. And so it is picked by what? Your sensory register or your sensory memory. So it is the first point of contact for any information that is coming into your memory. Now, there are separate sensory registers for each sense. How many senses do we have? We have 5 senses. We have your sight, your sense of what? Hearing, you have a sense of smell, you have a sense of taste, and you have a sense of touch. Okay, that is the 5 senses that we have. So there, for each of the senses, there are stores within the sensory memory. Okay, so basically, your sensory memory picks information from your senses. So there are some information you pick by seeing, there are some information you pick by hearing, there are those you pick by touching, there are those you pick by smelling, and there are those that you pick by tasting. And each of these senses have stores. So for example, in the sensory memory, we have the iconic store, and it stores information for those things that you can see. You have the echoic store, and it stores information for those things that you can hear within the sensory register or within the sensory memory. We have the olfactory and the gustatory. Olfactory has to do with those that you can smell. Gustatory is those that you can touch. You can taste, sorry. And then we have the haptic store, and those that has to do with touch or kinesthetic information, those that have to do with the movement of body parts, etc. So within the sensory register, we have stores that store information for each of the senses. So it the sensory register allows many unrefined information to enter through your brain. Remember that it is entered through your brain through nerve cells. Every sense organ is connected to the brain through certain nerve cells, and whatever information your senses pick, there are neural impulses that carry this information to your brain. For example, when you see a color blue, there are nerve cells that connect your eyes straight to your brain. And so for you to even interpret that this is the color blue, then your brain has what interpreted what you have seen or the information that your eyes have picked. And that is how the sensory memory works. However, the sensory memory has just a lifespan of 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because at any given point in time, you are exposed to so much information by virtue of your senses. There are some coming through to you through your sight, some through your ears, some that you can feel, some that you can taste, some that you can smell. There's so much information, and so the sensory register is the one that has the least capacity, 5 seconds. It does not keep any information beyond this limit, because if it keeps it, you are going to lose the memory unless you pay attention to the memory and then it moves to your short-term memory. And so the sensory register has a limited what capacity in terms of time, but it is limitless in terms of what sensory information. That is what I said earlier, that at any given point in time, you are exposed to a lot of information which come through your senses. Okay, so as I said earlier, information gets to your sensory memory or your sensory register through your sense organs. So you have sight, you have hearing, you have taste, you have touch, you have smell. The information lasts for just a brief moment, as I said, 5 seconds, unless attention is directed to it. So you are paying attention, you are focusing on that information. I am assuming that as I am speaking to you now, or as you are listening to this video lecture, there are so many other things in your environment that are trying to capture your attention, but you are focusing on this one because you want to pay attention to it so that it goes into your memory. Okay, so it is only information that is attended to or information that you keep or retains is what is moved to the short-term memory. So as I said earlier, the sense organs are connected with the brain through certain nerves. So once information is presented, the nerves pick it up and then they send it to the brain for interpretation. Now, the short-term memory, the sensory memory has five, not three. It has five sub-memories or memory stores. The first one is iconic memory. So it's responsible for picking visual information. We have echoic memory. It's responsible for picking what? Auditory information, so that these are things you hear. We have haptic memory, and it's responsible for picking information that is through your touch or through the movement of body parts, etc. Then we have the olfactory memory. This codes for things that or information that you can smell. And then we have gustatory, speaks information for things that you can taste. So you are able to code whether a certain type of food tastes sour, bitter, sweet, etc. So this is a picture that tells you the different sources or the different senses that the sensory register picks information from. And as the name suggests, it's a sensory register. So it picks information from your senses. So you have the echoic, things that you can see, the gustatory, things that you taste, the haptic, things that you can touch or that can be touched. So you have feelings, anything that you can sense through your skin, then that has to do with haptic memory. You have the olfactory that has to do with your sense of smell, and then the echoic has to do with things or information that you hear. So once the information is picked by the sensory memory or the sensory register, it has to be attended to. That's the main thing. Attention has to be paid to the information, or you have to focus on the information. And then it moves to the short-term memory. So the short-term memory is the second part of the memory system, and it allows for information to be processed. You see, when we're looking at memory processes, we looked at encoding, and here we have seen that encoding happens in the sensory register where the senses pick information. It is sent to the brain for interpretation. Now it moves to the short-term memory where the information is processed, okay, for a while. And just like the sensory memory, the short-term memory also has a limited lifespan of 20 seconds. So beyond this limit, it does not keep any information. Any information that is kept between this limit is lost. And so within the short-term memory, still information has to be what? Processed, rehearsed, and paid attention to before it can move what? To the long-term memory. So the short-term memory operates on 7 plus or minus 2 dynamics. You know, one of the things that is characteristics of the short-term memory is that you are able to group information into chunks based on a certain attribute. Okay, so if it is numbers, maybe you are able to hold the number in limits of 3 or in limits of 2. But even with that chunk, you can hold only 7 and maximum 9 information with that. Okay, so if it is a grouping, if it is attributes, whatever it is that you are deciding to group the information, it should have only 7 chunks, and it operates on the principle of plus or minus 2. So minus 2, the least you can keep is what? 5, and the maximum you can have is 9. Okay, so chunks basically are units of information. Units of information. So it could be a letter, a word, a number, or a common expression. So let me give a typical example. You are able to tell from your working memory whether you pick in numbers in bits of 2s or in bits of 3 by the way you repeat phone numbers. So I can say a person's number is 0242333127. Okay, here I'm picking in 4s and 3s. Some people are able to pick in only 2s. So they will say 024, 23, 21, 37, and then a last number because it's only one number that is left. So a chunk is what? A unit of information that you pick. Now within the short-term memory, we have what we call working memory. So let's look at what is in the working memory. It responds to information that you are currently aware of. Okay, that you are attending to as you are working to process other information. So, for example, you are trying to pick somebody's phone number, okay, and I have mentioned the number, or the person has mentioned the number to you, but whilst you are taking the number, you are trying to at the same time open your phone so that you can save that number. It means you are doing two activities at the same time. So the kind of information you are able to retain whilst you are also attending to other information is what is in your working memory. And so if you are able to retain all 10 numbers as you are able to open your phone and then dial the number, then you say that you are able to keep what 10 digits in your working memory. Some people might not be able to keep the 10 digits, okay? Some people might be able to remember 7 and then they'll ask the person to repeat the rest. So your working memory is the information that you can keep at a point in time as you are working on other information or attending to other information within the short-term memory. Okay, so your working memory also has a duration, and for units of information or for the chunks of information to be retained, it has to be rehearsed. That is why when the person is mentioning the number to you, you keep saying 0242 just for you to what? Keep the number. Just for you to keep the number in mind so that you'll be able to recall when you finally open your phone. Okay, so without rehearsal, information that is in the short-term memory is lost. Information that is in the short-term memory is lost. So working memory, we refer to working memory or we mention it as working memory because information that is kept there is just kept for a period of time. Okay, it has a short storage. Okay, and there are some manipulations that have to be performed before the information is moved to the long-term memory, and that is what we call what rehearsal, where you repeat the information. Okay, or you link the information to another information that you have. We have two types of rehearsal. The first one is one that you repeat it. So if I say 0242111333, you repeat it just to keep the number in mind. Or you say, okay, I have a friend who is also 0242111323, but yours is 324. So I will know that difference. You are linking the current information to another information that you have. And so you are manipulating the information so that you can retain it. Our working memory is important for us to reason, and it also helps us to take certain decisions. Okay, so reasoning how to keep information when you are in class and they are teaching you, you organize whatever it is in chunks, and that organization occurs in your short-term memory. So first, when we started, we looked at the processes where we said encoding, storage, and retrieval. So you have grouped that as one chunk. Now we are studying what the branches of memory. So we are looking at the sensory register, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. That also is another chunk. Okay, so all these things are within your short-term memory. And for 20 seconds, if you are not able to pay attention to that one, rehearse it or focus on it for it to move to your long-term memory, it will be lost. Now, the general agreement concerning our working memory is that it is extensively involved in goal-directed behavior, in which information must be retained and manipulated to ensure that successful tasks are executed. So, for example, as I am teaching, your goal-directed behavior is to pick the information and store it, okay, and remember it whenever you want to call. Or for the example of the person giving you the memory, the phone number, you would want to pay attention so that whenever you pick your phone, you will be able to dial it. So our working memory is focused on engaging in goal-directed behavior, okay, keeping information that is needed for what? Goal-directed behavior. Now let's do long-term memory. So first, short-term memory, barely 5 seconds. You pick information from your senses. you pay attention to it, it moves to your short-term memory. Your short-term memory too have to rehearse the information and you organize it in chunks for it to move to your long-term memory. And the long-term memory is the last part and it keeps information so you cease to live, so you die. And the capacity of the long-term memory is limitless. When I say limitless, I mean that it doesn't have any limit like the sensory register or like the short-term memory. So as you are alive, information, every information from your childhood, so where you are now is in your long-term memory. And anytime you want any information from there, yours is just to what? Retrieve. The last process, retrieve the information from your long-term memory. Okay, so information in your long-term memory actually fades or decays or dies out if you don't pay attention to it or if you don't use it often. It is possible for the information to be lost. Okay. Now, attending to information in the long-term memory is a personal effort and through practice or what application. So let's assume all that I am saying, you have encoded it, it is in your short-term memory, and finally it's in your long-term memory. But you have not made any effort to practice, maybe to read over or to go over the lecture, or try to use the information you have gotten from this lecture and apply it to certain scenarios. It is possible that that information will be what? Lost. However, if you attend to it by practicing, by application, it is very easy for you to access or retrieve that information anytime you want to. Now, information within the long-term memory has been categorized into two. The first is explicit memory, and the second is what? Implicit memory. So let's take each one of them and see what they encompass. So we have explicit memory. Explicit memory. Now, this is memory that is made up of conscious or effortful memory of situations, things that you take some consciousness or some effort to keep in your mind. Okay, so you are aware of the situation and you remember that you try to keep this in mind and then you make an effort to remember it. So explicit memory are conscious and effortful memory. Okay, so you remember that this morning when you woke up, you studied, you made the effort. It was a conscious effort you made. Okay, so that forms part of what your explicit memory. Now, explicit memory too has two types. Long-term memory can be explicit or implicit. And now we have said that explicit memory is memory that is conscious or that is effortful. Now, this conscious memory also is in two types or is in two categories. We have episodic memory, and it is about recalling autobiographic information of heart or information that occurs in episodes or information that you have witnessed or experienced. So when you were coming to school and maybe there was a fight at the main gate, you watched it, you experienced it. So if somebody asks you to recall, you can easily recall the episode, what happened there. You can say, oh, when I was in the taxi and I got to the junction, the one driver speedily ran through the ramps and the security. You are describing what happened. You experienced whatever it is and you can recall that information. So let's say just the elections that we had in December, you were part of it. You were at your polling center. You were there for some amount of time. And so if somebody asks you, oh, when you went to the police station, what happened? You'll be able to recall exactly what happened at the police station. And that is what we mean by explicit episodic memory. So you are able to remember all this information because you made a personalized effort to understand what went on, you witnessed what went on, and how you read judgment into it. Okay, you were not a part of it, but you had witnessed what went on there. Okay, so remembering the fact of an award that you won about 10 years ago, okay, you remember what happened there because you experienced the event. You went for a birthday party, you experienced the event, so you can recall it. And that is what we mean by episodic memory. Now, we have semantic memory. So, semantic memory has to do with things that you have not experienced yourself necessarily, but you have learned about it. So, we can talk about things that happened in the past, history, or the knowledge you have in what psychology of human development and learning. There are some things you have not experienced, but you have read about them. Okay, so you read about how Ghana had independence, the hunger in 1983 to 85, how many people travel outside Ghana, and how they went to Nigeria and they were sacked and they said Ghana must go. Some people did not witness this, some people, but they have read about it. And so that forms part of what their semantic memory. You read about the independence, the big six, what they did, and you're able to say it, and it is a fact. You did not witness the event, but you have made a conscious effort to read about it and to learn about it. Now, let's look at implicit memory. Now, what we just did was explicit memory. Now, let's do implicit memory. We said that explicit memory is what? Effortful and conscious memory. Memory that you take your own consciousness or effort to acquire. But for implicit memory, it's what? Unconscious or it's effortless. The abilities that you acquire effortlessly and you're able to recall situations or events because it has become a routine thing or something that happens quite often or something that you witness quite often. So it is about a skill or an experience that influences your behavior. Now, long-term implicit memory can be procedural or it can be priming. These are the two types, procedural, priming. Let's take a look at what each of them mean. So for procedural, process, so the process of doing something that has become a part and parcel of you, an ability, a skill that you do it effortlessly. So if you have been driving for some time, you learned the driving all right, but after some time, you just do it effortlessly. When you wake up sweeping, you don't use it, you do it has become a part of you. Okay, riding, walking, it has become of you. So you are doing it even without consciously um, taking any effort to do them. And these are what we mean by procedural memory, skills or abilities that are exhibited automatically. Now, priming memory. When the memory or the response to a stimuli uh, influences how you respond to other stimuli. That is where we have what we call priming memory. Okay, so it works when you associate the response that you have with another stimuli. So let's give an example. When a good student receive an award that he never planned for, he will consciously act automatically in ways that they had never expected so that he gets more awards. Okay, let me give another example. Assuming you watch a horror movie and you got scared, okay? The memory of that movie is in your head. So anytime you enter a dark room and then something creaks or something makes a noise, that memory from there will make you get startled, okay? Because maybe in the movie the person was working in a dark area when somebody attacked him. So that memory is there. And so when you hear anything or you are walking in a dark area and then you hear somebody moving or you hear any movement, all of a sudden you become frightened. That memory you had from the movie is affecting how you respond in this situation. And so we say you have a primary memory of the movie and you are using that response in this new situation. So this is just a diagram to pictorially give you what we mean by memory. So memory has sensory register, short-term memory, long-term memory. And for long-term memory, we have implicit and explicit. Explicit is conscious, implicit is unconscious. Explicit has episodic memory, things that you experience. Okay. Then we have semantic, things that you did not experience but you have learned of, general knowledge. Then we have procedural, things that require certain motor movement or certain processes. Okay. Skills that you can exhibit effortlessly, unconsciously. And then we have priming, when a previous experience or response to stimuli makes you to respond to similar stimuli in a certain way, okay, because you have memory of that stimuli. For example, in the case of what? The horror movie. So, how do we improve memory? We have learned about memory. How do we improve our memory? I just have few points, and you can also look for few points to add up. So we identify or we generate link between the new and old materials already retained in an organized fashion. Okay. So first, we have learned about what classical conditioning, operant conditioning, etc. And all that we have learned has been organized around certain topics. And so we try to draw the link between what we have learned previously and the new information. You know, these links help us to retain new memory and improve on our memory. Sometimes we develop images to supplement semantic form of content. So whatever I'm teaching you, you have not experienced it before. It is semantic memory, like a lesson now on what memory. But in the lecture, I am giving you pictures, I'm giving you images that will help you more understand and appreciate what we are trying to study here. So images that supplement semantic content can improve our memory. Now, thinking about the implications or the applications of the material, whatever we are learning right now, definitely we'll talk about the educational implications. And so learning to apply what we have learned also helps us to retain memory or improve our memory. And then answering questions. So that is why when we come to class, we ask you or we try to recap what previous things that we have learned before we go to the next lesson. I'll ask you, what do you remember about play-based learning, etc. And then discussions, group assignments. It is just not for fun, okay, for you to have group assignment. It's for you to what? Improve your memory. Sometimes the teacher teaches in class, you don't understand, but when you have a group discussion, a friend explains, you're able to get the meaning. And then that is what we mean by what having discussion and improving your memory. In as much as we have our long-term memory has a lot of capacity, it's limitless. Or let me just ask this question. Assuming you can remember or you store every information that has ever come across your way from the time you were a child to this point, what do you think will happen? You will have an overload of information. And so forgetting is a necessary part of what the memory system. Okay, so we forget things a lot. Some people say I don't forget things. There are certain information that you forget. Okay, despite their best intention not to forget. So when we say forgetting, we just mean a loss of information from your memory, okay, or your inability to access the information from your long-term memory, okay. So it is defined as loss of information over time. So there are two things here: your inability to what? Access the information or the loss of information. Okay. So your inability to access information could be due to improper retrieval cues. There are certain skills that we use to learn. Everybody and what works for them. So for some people, if we are learning about maybe independence, they will link it to certain things that they have heard before. That is their cue. Okay, so if they want to remember, they'll say, okay, when I remember that my grandfather was born in 1957, then when they ask me which year did Ghana get independence, I can say 1957. That is your cue. Okay, so sometimes the cues that we use to store information are inadequate. Okay, and so we are unable to retrieve when we want the information. Now, information in memory does not decay, become confused, or get lost. Rather, the memory trace is intact but cannot be accessed. So, there are some people that are of the view that the information does not get lost because it is still there. However, it is difficult for you to access it because the cues that you use to store the information were lost. Okay, so if you are able to trace the cue, then you will be able to what access the information. So we are having inadequate retrieval cues. So what causes forgetting? Researchers have disagreed on what causes forgetting. Some people say that the information is lost totally. Okay. Some people say that it's still there, but it cannot be retrieved. And so people have come up with different theories. We'll look at some of them. The first one is the theory of disuse, which says that forgetting takes place when there is no practice or when you are not using the information. So the information is stored there. You are not practicing, you are not rehearsing, you are not going over, you are not using it for anything. With time, you lose the information. For example, you've learned how to drive. First, you were able to drive. For some reason, maybe you don't have a car or somebody has been chauffeuring you around town and you have not driven in a long time. It will be difficult for you towards drive when you get the chance to drive because what you are not using that information, you are not practicing it. Okay. And so Thorndike, who is a behaviorist, emphasized that when practice is discounted after establishing a bond between stimulus and response, the connection is weakened, resulting from what? Forgetting. The more you exercise a particular skill, or the more you exercise or rehearse a particular knowledge, the more it is intact and easily accessible. But if you do not rehearse, if you do not practice, it is difficult for you what, to engage in that activity or recall the information easily. And that is what the theory of disuse seeks to what establish. We have the theory of what decay. They say that the material put in the short any material put in the short-term memory establishes a trace. Now, the trace decays simply as a function of time since the material was last attended to and it is revealed by decreased availability of the item for recall as time passes by. So, first, the information moves from your sensory memory to your short-term memory. Now, from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. While the information is moving from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, it leaves a trace. Now, over time, you are not able to access the information because it has been long since you last attended to that information or you used that information. So, with time, as time is going by, you are trying to retrieve, you will not be able to retrieve it. But the more you are able to trace and access the information, the more you easily retrieve it when you want to. So your inability to trace or attend to the information often will cause the information to decay. Then we have interference theory. They say that there are some things that interfere or block, okay, our ability to what remember or retrieve what we have learned or what we have put in our memory. So sometimes there are things that we have learned before that block our ability to learn new things, or there are things that we have learned now that makes us not to retrieve things that what we have learned in the past. And so these new things that we are learning, or these new things that we have learned before, interfere with our ability to what? Retrieve things from our memory. So there are two paradigms of interference theory. The first one is the retroactive, and the second one is what? Proactive inhibitions. Let's take each one of them and look at what they entail. For proactive, it occurs when an old learning experience blocks the learning of what? New experience. So one cannot learn a new task because of what previously learned task. I think I explained that earlier. And then we have the retroactive inhibitions. So the one that blocks the memory of old learning experience. So in other words, a previously learned task are forgotten because you have learned new ones. And this one is very common, where you have learned something new and you are using that often. And because you are the ones you have learned before, you are not using it often. The new one has interfered, so you are not able to what, perform the previous task, or you are not able to remember what you have learned previously. Assuming if I ask some people right now about the principles of what development, some will forget because as we are moving along the line, new information is coming in. And because this new one has come, it has interfered or it has blocked what you have already stored or what you have already learned. Another thing is what? Amnesia. Amnesia is the sudden loss of memory, okay? And people with amnesia have difficulties recalling things from their memory, facts, events, places, details. Sometimes it can get serious to the point of even retrieving details of their own names, etc. People are able to retain details of their motor skills, their ability to work languages, but information that they have stored previously they will not. So, for example, if the person has a child, the person even forget that they have a child. If the person used to, work at a certain place, they'll forget that they work there. And simply that is amnesia. Amnesia is caused by damage to the brain due to maybe head injury, stress, excess use of alcohol, etc. Reduced levels of oxygen in the brain and age. So when you have memory loss due to age, it is a psychological condition that is called dementia. There are different types of amnesia, but we will look at retrograde and anterograde amnesia. These are the very common ones. Retrograde amnesia refers to the loss of information that was required before the onset of what? Amnesia. When you study neuropsychology, you look at certain beautiful cases of what? Retrograde amnesia. So they lose, maybe the person has a head injury, and because of the head injury, the person loses information that he has acquired before the head injury. So anything that happened before the head injury, the person is not able to recall. But anything that happens after the head injury, the person is able to recall. And so older memories are lost, but newer memories are retained. If the person has this type of amnesia, it is called retrograde amnesia. Then we have anterograde amnesia. Anterograde amnesia refers to what? Impaired capacity for having memory for new things. However, they can remember old memories. So, for example, if this person with a head injury can remember old things but cannot have new memory for new experiences or new things, then we have anterograde amnesia. So the person remembers what happened in his childhood, but the person cannot remember what happened 2 days ago. That is what we mean by anterograde amnesia. We have other types of amnesia. We have the transient global amnesia. Here, the person just blacks out, okay, for few hours where the person loses memory, okay. And after the incident happens, the person does not have any memory of the experience, okay. So Scientists believe that it is caused by seizures. Seizure is when it occurs when your brain is lacking oxygen, and there are some, uh, misfiring of what neurons in your brain, and that can cause it, or it's caused by brief blockage. When there's a blockage, it means that oxygen is not getting to your brain. So the person has memory loss spanning for what? A period of hours. So the person becomes agitated and confused. So it occurs in what? Middle age and older adults. We have infantile amnesia. It occurs in children, as the name suggests. So these children have difficulty remembering things in the first 3 to 5 years of their lives. So this type of amnesia is what we call the infantile amnesia. Other reasons for forgetting include retrieval failure. When we say retrieval failure, you are trying so hard to recall the information, but you cannot recall, maybe due to what? Inadequate cues. Or maybe you did not even encode the information well. You intentionally forgot the information. That is what we call motivated forgetting. And then there are other organic or genetic causes that can make people forget. So, what techniques, what things can we do? I know some of us are still students. What are some of the things that we can do to minimize forgetting? So we have to pay attention. Attention is a very necessary tool for having memory or keeping things in our memory. So we must pay attention to the teacher, listen to his voice, and ignore other sounds, because attention is a limited resource. The moment your attention goes on other things, then whatever the teacher is saying or whatever you are trying to keep in your memory, you are not able to pick it. That is why we encourage students to always pay attention in class. Organization is the second point. So, when we properly organize information, it's difficult for us to forget. And we can organize things according to a particular category. Okay, so now we are learning memory. The categories are processes of memory, uh, branches of memory, theories of forgetting, etc. If you organize it like that, you're able to what? Remember than just learning everything at a go. That under memory, we have encoding, we have storage, we have retrieval, we have short term. No, what topics do they fall under? When you remember the topic, then you are trying to organize the information that you have. And then when you want to retrieve, when we say, oh, what are some of the processes of memory? Quickly, you pick it up and so it is encoding, it is storage, it is retrieval. But when you just learn everything all together without organizing it into meaningful chunks, it is easy for you to forget. So you classify in groups and organize it into chunks. Research supports the effectiveness of what organization for encoding among children and adults. So don't just learn in vacuum, learn in organized units. So today I am learning the principles of what development. So every point you have is under principles. But maybe today you learn principles, you jump to memory, then you come to conception. There is no organization, so it is easy for you to forget the information. Then you should rehearse. You should rehearse the information. Rehearsal is trying all the techniques that you do to keep the information in your mind so that you don't forget. We have two types of rehearsal, as I said earlier. Maintenance rehearsal, you repeat it often, and then elaborate rehearsal, you link or you relate the information to something you already know. When I gave the example of the phone numbers, I said that maybe you have um, somebody's number that ends with 37. So when somebody gives you a new number that ends with 38 and the other digits are the same, you link it to it and you say, okay, yours ends with 38, so I'll remember. That is what elaborative rehearsal. So in maintenance rehearsal, where we repeat information for immediate use of the STM, whilst in elaborate rehearsal, It involves repetition of the material for use in the long-term memory. So maintenance rehearsal usually occurs in short-term memory. That is when you are trying to let the information move into what? The long-term memory. But elaborate rehearsal occurs in the long-term memory, where you are trying to link it to what? Something you have already stored, something you already know. That is what we call elaborate rehearsal. What are the educational implications? As a teacher in the classroom, it means that attention is essential. And so you should ensure that students sustain attention in class. And you should come up with what? Very nice ways of sustaining students' attention. The first one is what? Giving them short breaks between tasks. Because once their attention goes off, it will be difficult for them to what? Encode and then move to short-term memory, even to long-term. And you know that the lifespan of information in the short-term memory is barely 20 seconds. So within activities, you should give children breaks. Then other effective strategies of attention include using different presentation style. Some people they learn from what they see. Some people by hearing. Some people can aesthetic, what they can feel and touch. So you should not only do slides and just write and talk. You should present pictures, diagrams, etc. That can make it easier for visual learners to easily encode, and then it goes to their short-term memory and then to their long-term memory. Allow students to ask questions and have discussions. If they are able to remember the discussions they have in class, they're able to understand well. Okay, so these are some of the things that can improve your memory. Also, you should try and minimize distractions in class. Okay, particularly when children are working independently. There are some things within the class that can serve as for distraction. Particularly, students can serve as distraction to what? Their fellow students. So, as a teacher, you should have control over the class and minimize distractions. You should monitor student behaviors that distract other students because attention, as we said, is a limited resource. So, learners can process only a very limited amount of information at a time. So, your lessons, they should not be overloaded. Even if they are overloaded, give break, intermittent breaks, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then you come back to the lesson. And then learners differ in their ability to control what they attend and consciously think about. Okay, so somebody's attention span can be different from another person. So as we said, there are differences. And so we should try and do things that will improve students' attention and so that they can able to store well and then retrieve information. So thank you for listening to this lecture. I want you to go and look for other ways that you can, maximize um, your children's ability to what retrieve things and have good memory. Um, if you come up with it, you can write it down. Then when we meet in class, we can discuss. Thank you so much, and